As we consider different types of ERP systems, there's really three ways that we can approach this. So first, there's what we call the vanilla approach. So the vanilla approach is just the generic off-the-shelf. So by the way, when we say off-the-shelf, one of the things you might often see is this thing called an OTS. OTS, off-the-shelf. So the vanilla approach is, hey, we buy this ERP system, and it comes as it is, and that's how we run it. Now, at the other end of the spectrum is customization. And customization is you build it from scratch, and it will do everything that you want it to do because that's how you built it. Now, the customization approach, very expensive. Very, very expensive. The vanilla approach will be the least expensive, but might not do everything that you need. So then there's an in-between, and this one's called best of breed. So the best of breed approach will actually take the off-the-shelf system, and then perhaps once it's been configured and you determine that you really need more than just what it can do, then you do a bit of customization. And so you take the best of both. You don't do a full customization, so your overall cost is lower because you're using the vanilla, but you're not stuck to just doing what the vanilla off-the-shelf system can do because you are doing something, it does something unique. Now, there is a step or a series of steps that you need to think about. If let's say you're tasked with your organization that you need to be involved in selecting an ERP system. And this is not an uncommon approach. As a matter of fact, you might be what we call a SME, an SME. An SME is a subject matter expert. A subject matter expert. So let's say your expertise is in marketing or your expertise is in accounting. And so the organization has decided that what they're going to do is they're going to either build or buy an ERP system. They want all the stakeholders to give their input to make sure that they select the absolute best system. They would go to you because you know what you do best, and they would say, all right, now, how do you do what you do? What do you need? And let's take a look at these different software packages or different options, and then make the best choice with what we know. This is exactly how many organizations do this. But there's kind of an overarching set of steps that every organization ought to take when they're evaluating the ERP system. And so the first thing that they want to do is you want to study your business processes first. Right? This is the first step. So if you're gonna buy an ERP system, then the first thing you need to do is, understand what do you do? How does your business function? If you are looking at things, let's say for example, procurement, how do you go about procurement? When you do accounts receivable, are you doing a 210 net 30? What process do you have in place within your organization? So the number one thing is, before you ever even look at different types of software, is understand what you do. That's the first thing. The second thing you do is, once you've understood what you do, you adapt them. Adapt your processes to improve business. All right, so once you've understood what it is that you do, you actually might not be doing it in the best way. You might be inefficient. And likely, a lot of organizations that have existed for longer periods of time, they are. And I mean, how many times in an organization have you heard people say, well, we do this because this is the way we've always done it? And honestly, if you begin to kind of follow the chain back as to what ultimately started it, it may be very well that there was some kind of system or some kind of event that took place a number of years back or however long ago, and then that actually then caused that business process to change. And so as you are actually going to get a new ERP system, you don't necessarily want to do business the way that you've been doing it. So this is an opportunity to actually adapt the process to improve business. And I've gone into organizations where, for example, on a manufacturing, they've even gone back and said, how can we make our floor more efficient? And they've done things like putting in lights, yellow, red, green, to show where there might be backups. And then at one point, I was in one aisle and I looked down the aisle, and what I saw was a series of pegboards at each station, and in each pegboard was slips of paper. And the paper were red or green, and so every time a piece of equipment got moved, they would take that red. They had, let's say, 100 pieces of work to do. They had 100 reds. Every time they got one done, they'd take it, they'd flip it over onto the green side, and then the person could look down the aisle and they could see where there were backups or where everything was flowing. A super low-tech approach in terms of improving their business process. Okay, that's the second thing. The third thing is, once you've improved your business process, the third thing is you select the software that's the closest match. And what we mean by this is that if the software, so if the match is greater than or equal to, let's say, 80% of functionality, then it's good, right? Then it's good. Right? So if the match is 80% or better of the functionality of what your business does, that's a good match. Now that should cause you to ask the question, what about that remaining 20%? What do you do with that remaining 20%? If a good match is 80% functionality, what about that 20%? Well, the reality is that 20% mismatch should drive you back up to steps 1 and 2. Because perhaps you didn't fully understand your business processes. Perhaps you didn't actually adapt your business processes as best as you could. That 20% could cause you to go back and say, actually, you know what, we missed some things. But let's say, though, you've done that, you've gone up, you've redone that, you come back down, you still have 20% mismatch. What does that 20% mismatch mean to you? It means that the ERP system can't do everything that you need it to do. So from the vanilla approach, you've got mismatch. But 80% does match. So I don't think we need to do a full customization, right? This is where we come back to the best in breed. That 20% mismatch might mean that your company is doing something different, innovative. It could be a strategic advantage. And if that's the case, then it would make sense to customize, right? I would argue that you want to avoid customization as necessary, but sometimes that customization is necessary because you're doing something unique. You're doing something that sets you apart. And that's worth kind of holding on to. That's worth actually customizing software to accommodate you, right? And then the last thing you do is you configure as needed. You configure as needed. So configuration and customization are two different things, right? Customization is doing brand new. Configuration is making you and the system work together in the constraints and with the preferences that are actually available. So this is really important because as we analyze and evaluate information systems, what we have to do is make sure that the information system aligns with the strategic direction of our organization. The information system has to go hand in hand with what our organizational strategy is. And so that 20% might be the thing that is the differentiator for us. So then we want our information system to meet that, to enable us to be successful, to be profitable, to be competitive.